Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Y: The Last Man, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Sarah sitting in that room with the pilot, because it's like, oh yeah, the president asked us to sit here. I guess it was more so like, well, not necessarily, she's more trusting of Sarah, not necessarily these pilots, but I guess it's like, right, because even those pilots start bringing up some questions of like, yo, but it's like, is this for real? Like, because they start asking questions that people on the outside would start asking of like, okay, so why him? I mean, granted, we are kind of ignoring the male monkey that was with him too, but more so than anything, it's probably like, well, the fact of the matter is she made sure her son survived and his pet monkey too. Like, that's all that's going to like kind of look at, but that's the problem. The optics aren't going to look good because everyone's going to assume like people already think the government has something to do with this, and then they're also going to think like, right, her son happened to be the only male that survived in the world, and she's like, what? So, President Brown decided to murder 4 billion people and then it happened to spare her son. It's like, I mean, fact of the matter is, it's not that wild when you look at the fact is, at the end of the day, it is only her son that survived. So, it's not in well. And especially if people on the outside found out about it, it's like, that'd be a whole issue. Once again, it's like people already feel like they're being lied to and a lot of stuff is being held back from them. But once again, a lot of people believe that the U.S. in particular is involved, or at least like knew what was going to happen and stuff like that ahead of time. It makes you wonder, because of Sarah's orders, like they knew there was a credible threat against the president. They probably didn't know. Definitely didn't know it was going to turn into this. So it's not like they were well prepared. Makes you wonder, is there actually anyone out there in the world who was prepared, who knew like the full extent of what this was going to be? I don't think this went the way it was supposed to. I think it was supposed to be a bioweapon that went super out there, way far beyond what they thought it would be. But regardless, you have Yorick, sleeping in the same bed with his mom, because it's like, right, like, after considering the end of the world, of course you're going to want to like be near your mom. Your mom's going to want to be near you because she just assumed you were dead. Because she even apologizes to Yorick later of like, I actually, I should have sent Vit looking for you. And he's like, no, it's okay, Mom. You thought I was dead. Like, it's completely understandable. And also the fact is that it turns out that wasn't his first time at Hero's place last episode. He's actually been there a few times, but I guess he goes back hoping that maybe she'll stop by. Well, Yorick slipped out of his room chasing after Ampersand. And as he's doing that, like, Kim's mom wakes up. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be bad, because like no one's supposed to see him, because that's going to be an issue in its own right. Luckily, she's in kind of like her condition she is right now. She's not in the best place. So both Sarah as well as Jennifer were able to make it seem like, oh, you're just crazy. But obviously, it's too much. Too much could go wrong if he gets caught. It's even interesting because the fact is he's getting fed a lot of food to the point he ends up throwing it up later on. I'm curious, like, does he know, like, everyone's kind of desperate for food, but maybe their situation inside is a little bit better. So it's like, probably some people's servings got cut a little bit. Maybe Jennifer cut back on what she was eating just so Yorick would have a whole lot. But because it's like going so long without, like, eating a proper, balanced enough meal, and then all of a sudden, like, shoveling so much food down your gullet like that, of course you're going to throw up. But obviously, like, I think Yorick had some idea of everything, but he didn't know the full scale of everything. For one, he didn't know all those people died just sitting at their desks, some of them. It's like, right, keeping the bodies there. So it's like, yeah, but your mom is trying to prioritize the living. And it's so interesting because in some of, like, Yorick's remarks, it's like, you sound like such a... sound like such a condescending douchebag, because I think, like Hero, he had some complicated feelings towards his mom as well, so I think maybe that was kind of coming into play, because even him being like, yeah, kind of, the apocalypse kind of worked out for his mom, because they actually break it down a little bit more about the Ascension, about like a lot of the other members are gone. One person in particular who could have taken the mantle of the president was born in, was it like Argentina or something like that, was not born in the U.S. Once again, the staple for the U.S. is you have to be at least 35 years old, and you had to have been born in the U.S. or at the very least in a U.S. like army base, because there's army bases around the world, and wasn't like Obama born on like an army base? Or was it born in Hawaii or something like that? So it's stuff like that. I think it's like army bases still count as like U.S. soil, even if they're in a different country. That whole thing. So, but also like the next person in line would be Regina, but she's dead too. She died in like, so it went from like her it went to Jennifer being speaker to immediately to being president. But there's a whole conversation about like Uric kind of figuring out like, wait, like, are there any other men? Like, are there any other men besides me? And it's like, no one else with the Y chromosome, and that kind of like hits him to be like, wait, what? Like, no, this can't be. And even asking about his dad, and she's like, yeah, he was staying at that particular motel or whatever, so that's where they found him. So he's been found and has confirmed it. So it's like, it's really looking like Uric's the only male alive. And so obviously, other than Sarah, Christine gets brought into the conversation, being the only other person that knows what's what in that regard. So now it becomes later on a conversation about what to do, about multiple things. One, the pilots, because they're not going to be they're asking a whole bunch of questions. They're not going to be wanting to sit idly by, especially sitting on this information. We have no idea what they'll do with it. Plus, if the public finds out about this, it's just going to be one more thing like, oh, like they're lying about this. Like they're going to tear this place apart. It's like we're going to have a Russia situation on our hands. And so she explained what happened in Russia, that basically the officials like try to be like, yeah, we have a governing body. It's like, it's 12 men. People stormed it, found out it was a lie, that was propaganda, and now it's just been chaos. So the U.S. doesn't want to find itself in those very same circumstances. So, and what I think is so interesting is that Uric isn't some altruistic person who believes like, hey, like I've got everything, like I'm going to be the big time hero. Even he admits like, you know, you never say this, Mom, because you're not an asshole, but you and I both know I'm nothing special. Like the fact is, it should be like, who knows, there might be someone else out there, someone else that's better qualified. Because for him, it's like, all I want to do is get back to Beth, which like, oh yeah, did I mention we're engaged? I wanted to surprise you. It's like, it's fine and dandy that you love her, but it's like, yeah, she's not in New York, but she has like a mom that's getting like chemo treatment or something like that, or somebody she in her family's getting chemo treatment in like Ohio, so it's like that's most likely where she went. So it's like, because at the end of the day, it's like they want to bring like a geneticist to him, because it's like, right, if we can get someone to examine you and replicate it, then maybe we can potentially find a cure for this. It won't bring back those who are already dead, but at the very least we'll be able to potentially like any like male anything with from, you know, fertilities related to males, it could be, you know, that could be inject, like kind of make it so that they could, once again, we still don't know that aspect of like, right, everything that's, are all the males, you know, the question got brought up before too, like, are all the male, like anything, like all the girls are fine fertility wise, but like would the boys like in their states be okay, or like are those sperms like completely like, or even the eggs or whatever, like whatever process the pregnancies may have been, and like how much of that was like nipped in the bud already, you know, when it came to the males. Like, and so if you tried it now, like would the males automatically die? That's the big question like I'd asked previously. We still are unsure, but at the very least Uric's DNA could potentially have a means to a cure to making that potentially a sure thing. But even Uric doesn't even believe like this. He's like waiting just for any moment for his head to explode, because he's like, I just want to take this time to, you know, whatever time I have left. He just wants to kind of be with Beth, and he's like, I don't want to be something special. I'm not anything special. Like, I'm not the type of person that's like, right, the save the world type. It's like, I get, Mom, you've always been ambitious, and you know, so it's like. And he's like, I'm not trying to use that as a criticism, but he's like, I'm not the save, you know, I know you want me to say like, I should be the one saying stuff like, hey, I'm here to save the world. But he's like, yeah, I'm not that guy. And I think that's so interesting, because like, yes, it makes him look like such a selfish prick, but it's like also at the same time, it's like, I mean, would every person, like, in his circumstances, like, you know, I mean, it depends on, like, how optimistic or pessimistic you are towards humanity, whether you believe, like, the literal last man on Earth potentially being the cure for all, like, at least, like, the survival of the male species, or at least the rebirth of the male species to a certain extent. Like, if he, like, would anyone else in his shoes, you know, take that opportunity, or would someone just be like, kind of like him and kind of falter a little bit? Once again, it just depends on your perspective. Do you think the best of humanity? Think like, no, people would definitely do it, or would, you know, there be people kind of like Uric who are kind of selfish, you know? It is kind of interesting when Sarah kind of broke it down, or being like, oh, like his name comes from Hamlet and everything, and it's like, right, your parents named you after a dead clown, and it's like, Yorick, you could tell the expression on his face, like, oh, he didn't appreciate that one bit. I did think it was interesting that he kind of saw through Sarah. He was like, yeah, are you secrets? You're supposed to be Secret Service? Nuh-uh, like, what is she, CIA or something? Which is like, yeah, I guess because his mom's been in government enough, and maybe he is well-read enough to know, like, who, like, how a particular government, like, some of the stuff she was saying just wouldn't be, I guess, coincide with Secret Service. Because Sarah's the one that kept suggesting, like, we take him away from here because him being here is a complication because someone could, like, secrets don't stay secret forever. Anyone in this government building could end up blabbing, and that could be a whole issue. Also, like, anyone on the outside could find out, and they could just steamroll their way in. So it's kind of like a lose-lose in that regard. Actually, the geneticist that Sarah ended up picking was someone not on the list, because she had actually got removed from the list because she'd actually, like, she wasn't taking bribes from, like, the Saudis or something, and it's like, oh, was she not taking bribes? And no, Sarah's like, oh, no, she is, but she was, but the fact is, we need someone off the books like her. If we get someone well enough known that, yeah, if they disappear for a while, that's going to start asking questions, but she's off, like, the radar. She's very good at what she does. Obviously, she's very talented, but she's not enough in the spotlight and kind of well known enough that if she went a little dark, no one would think much of it because of her reputation is basically in the trash. So, like, no one would, you know, think much of it. So she's the perfect person to kind of choose, because I think Christine's reason for it was like, right, if she was willing to kind of like take bribes in that regard, like, who's to say that we can guarantee that she'll keep quiet about this whole Yorick thing, so that she'll cooperate and do kind of the right thing in this regard. But Sarah saying that in itself is actually because she doesn't care about anything else but the work. So that's what's going to drive her to do this, to be the one that be able to, it's like the recognition necessarily, maybe it comes afterwards, but it's more so like right about the work and discovery about being the one to figure things out, you know, so. But like I said, Yorick just wants to find Beth. It's like after that, you can kind of do whatever you want to. You get blood. I can jerk off into a cup. And his mom's like, ew, just don't say that. So, which his mom's got complications all on her own, because it turns out good old Regina's alive and well in Tel Aviv. She survived. Man, oh man, did she jump on that quick. And it's just kind of like, yeah, I'm sorry to tell you. I know it's hard to believe. She's like, I'm the president. Like, she jumped on that quick. Like, she wasn't too, oh no, all the men in the world. You're telling me I'm the president now because all the men are dead. Like, she did the math in her head super quick. And I'm like, that shows where your priorities are. You are injured. Like, they had to, like, get down, like, the swelling in your brain and your skull, you know, and it's like, right, you immediately jumped on it. Like, oh yeah. And so they contact, now everyone knows that, and it's like, right, some of the people that are there are like, right, we should ignore it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, what does, like, who actually, succession line, like, why does that actually matter now, considering everything? But it's like, right, this is the Constitution. Like, if you want to throw this out, like, you know, that you want to just, if you want to ignore this, you might as well throw out the rest of the Constitution as well. But there's a lot of people that's like, right, Ted, he was a friend and everything, but he should have never brought her into the fold. And now we're in a situation that's like, and then like another member, it's like, yeah, like Ted gave leeway to like the racists and the anti-vaxxers and stuff like that. There's a conversation about like Jesus wasn't vaccinated. And then like one of the people was like, wait, did she actually say that? It's like, once again, it's just like, it's real world of like, right, politics, right? Stuff like that can and would be, and probably has been said. So it's like, right, she cannot be the president. So despite everything, it's like, we could, like, if we all show a united front, she will fall in line. Which, no, she's probably been waiting for this. Like, when you have the opportunity to literally be the most powerful person in the world, because a president is considered that, like, you're not going to pass up that opportunity, especially in an apocalyptic situation. Oh, you're definitely going to be like, oh, you're going to strut yourself. You're going to flex hard. And it comes at the worst time, because Kimberly is all about like exerting, like, right, this is like, because she feels like her values aren't getting across, which I'm like, is this really the time to be worried? But I guess I get it, because you're also, because Kimberly's the one worried about continuing the species, because she's like, right, we need men. So like, the president's way of, Jennifer's way of handling things would mean like leaving a lot of those facilities, because all the other fertility centers have been brought like together, like it has, like they've been picked up and stuff like that. But New York was the one that was kind of left in the wayside. It's like one of all the other ones, so it isn't that bad. But I guess it's still like a right. We need all the pools to kind of pull from. But Kimberly's like, because it's just I get where she's coming from, but it's also just like, really, it's just the time to be basically trying to pull a coup, especially, you know, because she was even telling, like, one of the teachers, like, right, our values and stuff like that. She's just like, the other one who's kind of like looking after children, she's like, I'm not even really about that, but it's like our views have to be represented. So it's like when the time comes, it's like, what time are you talking about? Kimberly didn't say it, but she's talking about literally throwing a coup. It's like, well, the apocalypse is the best time as any to kind of do that without too much issues. But now that she ended up finding out Regina's alive, she gathered all other people who feel the same way. And it's like, oh, you're trying to hide it from us. It's like, no, we just found out. Granted, we were going to hide it from you because we can't let her become president. So all of them were going to back her. But now it's like, right, Kimberly now knows, and she already told all these people, and I'm sure she's ran and tell everyone else too. So of course she's going to want Regina in position because she's like, Regina was picked by my dad. It's like, right, meaning that she kind of has the same values as you. So having someone of your like nature and everything, your side of the political scale in office, it means you can get your word in edgewise because you feel like you haven't been invited to the big kids table. You're kind of forced to sit off to the kids table because it is the thing of like, right. Because I think her friend had brought up, like, right, no one's asking why you're still here. Like, you know, because it's like, yeah, you might bump heads with, like, Jennifer, but she is trying her best, you know? It just seems a little, but obviously it's like for her, it's just like, yeah, this is about my dad, yada, yada, blah, 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 so on and so forth, so that's interesting. But all of this is what pushed Jennifer even more so in the direction of like, right, this has to happen because it's becoming too dangerous to leave him here now. And so you're against it at first, but his mom is like, right, you think I want you, I want you to leave. It's like, I just got you back from the dead. I never want you to leave my sight, but this is, you know, but for him, it's like, it should have been someone else. It should have been someone else. Someone like the guy out there, like that picture of like with the purple heart, it should have been dad even. It's like, but it's not any of them. It is you, you know? So, and he kind of sucks up and realizes like, right, this is for the greater good. It has to be me because if it's not me, there's no one else. So I kind of have to do it. I don't, you know, because he wants to, more so than anything, he wants his life back, which even Jennifer was like, yeah, I don't think I'll be able to give you that back. Like, normal, like, what life was before is gone. There's those, well, in the words of Chunk, no Captain Chunk, the band, gone are the good days. So basically, Sarah's kind of got it in her mind, like, right, I'm ready to, like, do this. So she ends up giving the pilots, like, medals, and I was like, oh, this, like, the look on their face, I was like, you could tell they were immediately realizing that it was a bribe, but it's like, right, you are, I forgot, one of them was an instructor, the other one was something else, but it's like, right, oh, like, one just did, like, supply cargo runs, and the other is an instructor. It's like, neither one of you joined just to do that, so this is a job being offered to you by your president. This is your chance to, like, do something greater. I mean, we're talking about saving the world, potentially, like, looking after him, because we can't let anyone know about this, so luckily Sarah was able to sneak him out. Granted, you had to sneak him out under some dead bodies, so it was not a copacetic situation for him, but it did work out. I did think it was interesting as they were leaving, like, Sarah was like, thank you, and they all kind of gave her, and she was kind of giving them looks like, I don't know if in her mind then she had decided or whether it was already in play and she kind of felt guilty about it, if that's what it was. Because she kept saying, like, I'm going to take care of it, which I'm like, in your line of work, I know what take care of it means. I know it means, like, not necessarily like like, I guess like the bribe was supposed to be the first part, but it's like, no. Like, I'm curious, like I said, at what point did she decide? Because as they're flying away and everything, you see him kind of staring off in the distance, because I think he's still thinking like, oh, I want to go to Ohio and stuff like that, or at very least probably thinking about leaving his mom behind. And then the plane in front of him explodes. I was like, oh, Sarah, you did. She's like, no, we got to go forward. I was like, yep. And I think even Yurik's kind of picking up on it. It's like, right, who did your mom just send you out with? But it's like, of course she did it because, right, she couldn't take the chance because they're too much of a liability, so they have to be removed from the equation. But even though Yurik is gone, it's still the complicated thing of Kimberly coming over and be like, oh yeah. And she brings up an interesting and complicated conversation about, like, grief, like, shouldn't be quantifiable. Like, everyone's grief is, like, no one's grief is more than another person's. like, I mean, at the very least, on a human level, you shouldn't compare grief. Like, just because, like, say someone who lost one parent versus someone who lost two parents, just because that person lost, like, even more, it doesn't invalidate that person who lost just one parent. Like, everyone's grief, like, losing someone you care about sucks regardless. It is sucky, though, like, the only person Jennifer lost in her regard. Like, if everyone found out, it was like, oh, you only lost your husband, but your daughter's fine and well, and she'll get the benefits of you being the president. Well, that depends if Regina gets her way, or if Kimberly gets her way in that regard. But also, your son's alive, and that's even more of an issue because he's the only male human alive. So there's that whole avenue to it as well. But I thought it was interesting, like, she's saying all this stuff about, like, you know, it's like some have lost more than others. You get what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, like, it's like I said, it's kind of sucky to quantify guilt like that, like comparing and contrasting your guilt to someone. It's sucky, but it is still a very, like, for the plot wise of the show, it is a very interesting and complicated thing to kind of do that for, because it is like, yeah, there are some who have lost more than others, you know, because even in her case, like, she lost more kids than, even if you don't count, like, she just lost Yorick and her husband, it's like, well, in at least in Jennifer's case, but it's like, at least she would still have her daughter, like, you know, obviously Kimberly, it's kind of like she lost more, so she kind of lost everything in one fell swoop. That's kind of why, like, her mom kind of fell apart a little bit too in the aftermath of everything. But regardless, Kimberly did say, like, yeah, it's interesting because, like, the moment she made reference to Yorick, like, at 7-year-old and stuff like that, I'm like, where the hell is this going? And then she brings us, like, all the people my mom could have saw, my dad, her dad, she saw your son, and you could tell Jennifer getting a little like, oh boy, this is going to be an issue. Which there is a silver lining to everything, because I focus on the more, like, yikes and very, like, oh, things could go bad side of things. Jennifer was able to convince Sharon to work, and, like, because obviously Sharon was kind of grieving. She'd been working really hard, but also, like, she ended up taking time away because she hadn't had a chance to really grieve. I mean, it's just been one thing after another. Like, I'm sure a lot of people have been working past their grief. They probably haven't had an opportunity to really grieve, because we have no idea, like, everyone that's in that building, like, what they've lost. Like, those are probably handled in those, like, previous, like, 60-some days that we haven't really covered. We kind of skipped over, so they had their time to grieve for a little bit, but it's like, right, we had to get to work. There's a world out there to save. There's still pieces to this world that we have to, well, piece together. So Jennifer was able to convince the Sharon to basically help them get the power back on, because they don't have anyone else that could do it. Side note, it is kind of complicated because she tried not to lean into it too much, because Jennifer talked about her kids and stuff like that. Like, she understands, like, because she has two kids that were like her two kids, 2 years apart age-wise. So, but it's like she was kind of still talking about Yorick like what he wasn't alive. Obviously, she needs to, but it's still a complicated thing of, like, she still had to say goodbye to him and, you know, hope that he is okay and that everything works out, because he might die out there for all she knows. So she might still end up losing him. So all she can do is hope for the best, especially with him being the key to potentially fixing everything. So there's that. Then we cut back to Nora's circumstances. Her and Mac, they find their way back. And I think it's interesting. It's like, oh, were you able to get in? It's like, no one there remembered me. It's like, well, what did they say about the power? And then Nora's kind of like, I couldn't find anyone to talk to. It's like, because, funny enough, and maybe you can make the argument it's karma, you were sitting there to kind of investigate stuff, not only be able to get in there to talk to somebody, but also to figure out, like, you know, what the power situation was going to be. She was only worried about getting her and her daughter in there. It's obviously apocalypse. That's when the self-preservation really kicks in. Once again, best of humanity, worst humanity, just comes down to your perspective. But it's like, that's why I immediately kind of like, oh, and maybe the argument could be like karma kind of got you back, because you were probably going to most likely leave those people behind. Maybe I'm being super pessimistic and believing like, oh, like you were going to come, but it's like, you were more so concerned about, like, because you didn't bother asking about the power. The moment you couldn't get in, you just like bounced. You probably could have asked the soldiers about it. They probably could have gave you at least some answer, but the fact is you didn't even ask. You even realized it in that moment. You're like, yeah, I couldn't find anyone to talk to about that. So I guess you can make the argument karma kind of strikes again, sadly, when those people that are with her, it's like, right, there's only a limited amount of supply, because like, oh, are we going to leave here? And it's like, yeah, so-and-so only has so much supplies, and, you know, we had to make a decision as a group. our kids already know each other. It's like, oh, boo, shut your mouth. Like, don't even continue this. You want to leave and leave us behind, fine. And even, like, Nora having to make an excuse like, no, I told them to go on ahead, that we'll be faster on our own. But outside, Mac found her dad and her brother's body, because I guess Nora just didn't ever bother, like, burying them, which is kind of rough. Like, I feel like I guess she figured she was never coming back there, so I guess that's why she never did. She had too much to think about. She ended up getting, like, it looked like it was a Michelangelo, because it looked like a Ninja Turtle toy, where she ended up putting the arm back on it, and it just kind of like, it just hit her, you know. It's like having to be reminded of what she lost, having to be back in the house. Didn't want to be there, obviously. But then Mac was like, no, we need to bury them. We can't leave them here, especially because the crows were pecking at their bodies. And so she started digging, and she says, like, fuck this. Then I'm like, oh, because it's just kind of like, right, I'm stuck doing this. And then there's a giant bird beside her, which I'm like, that looked like that might be a vulture. That was a huge-ass bird. And then she was just kind of like, and bounce. Oh, I remember what she was saying. She was like, fuck you, fuck the crows, or whatever. And then she bounced and left the bodies there. I was like, really? I was like, not unless she did put the bodies in afterwards, but it just seemed like it just cut to her in the car with the Mac, but I'm like, that's why I'm wondering, did she not bury them all? Because probably it's like, what's the point? They're dead, and they're just going to use up more energy this way, so they leave, but as they're leaving and Mac is fiddling with the radio, it's like, oh, there's, the radio station. It's like, oh, so there's power on somewhere. Granted, it goes off, so it's like, right, they had that little spark and glimmer of hope because they're smiling at each other, and then immediately, like, reality smacks them in the face again. And I think Nora needs that, like, big boost, because I'm telling you, I think she's gonna become a villain. I think she's gonna, like, if Walking Dead standards, is she gonna be a Negan? I don't know, maybe kind of a Shane or a Governor, maybe, I don't know, but I'm like, yeah, I got my eyes on her. Ever since last episode, I've had my eyes on her of like, yeah, I'm waiting for her to turn villain because of all of this. So I'm curious with Regina potentially taking over and the new regime that's most likely going to happen soon. I'm curious how Nora's going to fit into that, considering she did work for Ted. Like, maybe that still will opt her an opportunity. And once again, her and Jennifer already have beef. So if she ever, like, gets the opportunity, she's going to do everything she can to screw Jennifer over just to make her position better, I'm sure. We'll see. Self-preservation for her and her daughter. But, you know, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everything takes us going forward into the next episode. I believe going forward, obviously, it's going to be, like, week-to-week episodes. I have to look up on IMDb to see how many episodes there are in total. I'd assume it'd be, like, 10 or 13, but it might be less. It is 10 episodes, but regardless, like I said, I'm very interested to see where everything takes us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.